Welcome into Lion Pride Sports again for another Coach's Edition to our show, and I am now being joined by Josh Macy of the men's rugby team. He's in his third year as the head coach, and Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now let's take a look at the preseason, right? 8-1 so far, a good start for the guys. Just sum up this fall as a whole.
So we bring a lot of new faces onto campus every year, and fall for us is about getting to know those players, seeing what they have to offer us as a group, and then just establishing some of our competitive standards before we really get going in the spring.
And then talk about these players a little bit, because I mean, just for you, I'll get your scouting perspective here in a second, but just the players on this team, they come from so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures. So how do you get them to mesh as one team, being as if, you know, they're kind of looking at this as, well, we have, you know, this group of guys that I'm similar with, but, you know, we don't really connect well with these guys. Well, how do you mesh those two?
We have a lot of fun as a team. You know, we try and mix things up into smaller groups so that guys can get to know each other, experience those commonalities that they, you know, eventually have. And, you know, a big part of that is, you know, you want to use those groups to your advantage. We have a lot of leadership on our team, and, you know, if you can lead the guys who are kind of like you in the right direction, when you add all those peer groups up, you get a good team.
And then now the scouting perspective, like I just mentioned, what goes into scouting a rugby player, first off?
So, I mean, it's a pretty physical game, right? So you can never really deny measurables, you know, size, strength, speed, those things. But to come to Lindenwood, you know, if you're not from the St. Louis area, it can be a little bit of a tough transition sometimes. And so we want to see somebody who is, you know, flexible and maybe has some other life experience where they've traveled a little bit. And that just makes their adjustment here all the easier.
And then when it comes to, you know, finding guys nationally, nationally recognized, how do you look at film from these guys, or do you get film sent to you?
A lot of players out there do self-identify, and, you know, we get highlight tapes sent to us all the time of players who want to seek an opportunity here at Lindenwood. And after that, it's just about, you know, doing our diligence and finding out which ones would be a good fit.
And then the first game of this season, we're going to bounce back to the fall preseason here. It was against the Royals, and it was a tough loss, you know, a 3-point loss. And would you kind of consider that to be early season jitters?
Yeah, some of it. So in the fall, in order to kind of ascertain the level of a lot of our new students, we do mixed rosters in the fall. So we may be starting a freshman alongside a senior because we want to adjust him to that level of play. And the Royals are a good local team, you know, coincidentally filled with Lindenwood alums also. And so it was a really fun match, and there's a lot of good rivalries and friendships on that field. And, you know, it was a 3-point loss, but it being that early, you know, we have so much time to learn from it that it really rolled off our backs.
And you talk about learning from it, you win 8 in a row after that. So
exactly.
That's got to be the biggest takeaway, at least from this end of the fall season to what happened early on.
Yeah, so we ended the fall on a high. You know, we had a weekend where we played 3 games. We played 65 different players in those 3 games, and we won all of them in resounding fashion. You know, 2 against good college opponents in Michigan and Davenport, who's a conference rival for us, and then another one against another club team at home here. So it was great to have everybody contributing, and that was really like a great exclamation point on the end of the semester coming into our main season in the spring.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that Michigan trip was all started off in Grand Rapids, correct?
We actually started in Ann Arbor. We went to the University of Michigan, and we played Michigan with a lot of our younger players, and it was great. We played their first team with a lot of our younger guys, so it was a real honor for them to kind of carry the load in a league, what essentially was a league or conference match. Okay,
so anyway, the question that I was wanting to get to is the weather up there had to be at least a little, you know, chillier than what it has been like. You know, here in Missouri, you could get a 65-degree day, and then the very next day it snows. So going up there and playing in 35-degree weather, okay, I would expect, you know, guys are wearing, you know, tight-fitting long sleeves, but there's not really much padding that goes into being a rugby player because you're still hitting guys padless. So what does, like, weather play a big condition as a difficulty factor when it comes to playing in a match?
Yeah, we want guys to be disciplined but flexible. Right? And so we maybe have a style that we like to play, something that suits us, but we also have to know if it's pouring down rain or it's snowing, like it was in Michigan, we may have to change up how we play, maybe kick the ball downfield a little bit more, force the other team to make a mistake rather than sort of running and gunning.
Do most of the players that you have on your roster come from their actually a native country, or do they come from a state in the U.S. like they came here early on and that's when you saw them? Or do you really take them away and they become that true international student?
About a third of our roster are international students, and they normally come here from points further afield, right? So they finish high school in whatever country they come here from, and they're looking at their college or their rugby options in their home countries, and they realize they can combine both of those at Lindenwood, and that becomes an attractive option for them.
So then. And I didn't mean to stop you with that answer, but I wanted to get to when it comes to weather in these countries. A lot of times it's just warm in a country or it's just cold in a country. You never really get the in-between. So when you talk about being flexible, how do you look at a player from, say, a guy that comes from a warm area to say, oh, he can be okay in the cold too?
Yeah, I think it's just that mindset. We want them to be flexible and have some life experience, maybe have gone to different things. So, when we're bringing in a beach bum from Melbourne, for instance, and he enrolls in Lindenwood in January, it can be a little bit of adjustment, but as long as he has a good coat, there's no bad weather, just bad clothes, right? So get the kid a good coat, make sure that he's having fun and he's integrating into the team well, and he'll end up being fine.
And that comes with the baggage, right? You get a package deal when you sign, you get this bag, and there's that big coat in there. So that's in there. That's good. Now back to you really fast. You're in your 16th year as just a coach overall. Have you pretty much seen it all?
No, I think rugby, there's a lot of new territory in rugby. Rugby's kind of a weird sport in that they even adjust the rules every year, so it kind of keeps you on your toes as a coach. I mean, players and cultures are always changing, so I know for me it's really important to kind of stay ahead of the game. We really change up how we want to play and even how we recruit year to year to year because, we don't want people catching us, and if we stay the same, they're going to catch us, so we always just if people figure out what we do and they try and emulate it, we've already left that behind, a year or two ago, and that's really the goal. So we want to be breaking new ground, and I think that's an important part of our program here.
So you talk about change. In 16 years, do you really see yourself changing your game plan as a coach every single year?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one of the things you'll never hear any of our staff say is, we'll never hearken back to how things were done when we played. If you look back then, look back even before I played, guys had mutton chops and they wore long cotton jerseys, and why would we want to play rugby like that? And so players are more athletic, the game is a lot faster, and so we're coaching to how we want the game to be played in the future, not how we necessarily learned it in the past.
And you talked about being a player. Talk to me about, as a coach, being a former player. Does that impact your decision making as a coach, or does that really kind of give you a little bit more of an outlook on a player's perspective? And when you address a player, are you a little more kindly toward them, or do you really say okay, I was in that position before and I know what to do to correct that?
Yeah, it's hard. I think when you approach players like that, it's easy to talk at them, and they can walk away feeling like their situation wasn't heard. And we kind of just keep that in a box. A lot of our coaching staff has had good playing experience and other experiences here and internationally. But again, we just try and focus on the players in front of us, and we all try to be good listeners and understand where they're coming from. And if we lean too hard on our history as players or even coaches, it can be difficult to do that.
And now, again, you're in your second year here as the men's coach for the Lindenwood Rugby, or rather, you're going on your third year. You've already finished 2 tenures. What do you feel, or how do you think you've made the impact to this program?
There was always a really competitive environment here at Lindenwood, and I think what we've been able to do, since I started here, is the guys have really taken their culture seriously. Where how do we make this not only a competitive place where you're going to be challenged off the field, but can we make sure that we're looking after our players, that they're also looked after off the field as well, and that's really shown a lot of dividends, I think, on and off the field.
And speaking more of players now, looking back at the fall, who do you think has been the standout performer?
That's a good question. So we have Chance Wengluski, who's a current national team player. He played for the national team twice this fall. And he's a big-time player, the best player in the country at his position, and plays a pretty central role in getting play started for us. And then, we have a lot of dynamic players, junior college transfer student, Annalisa Mateto, who's originally from South Africa, transferred from a JUCO in Iowa. Again, big-time playmaker, can really bust through the defense. And between those two, we can get it started. Mateto helps us get it going, and after that, it's just about finishing.
And then talk to me a little bit about if there were any key injuries that you guys have been trying to work through.
So injuries are a part of life in rugby. It's a physical game, and we train physical as well. And so we're going to have injuries. It'll be nice getting Lorenzo Thomas back, senior center, really big unit of a guy, big, bold personality that the guys can kind of wrap their arms around on and off the field. And we'll be getting him back from knee surgery in January, so looking forward to that.
And then the new faces on the team. Let's talk about the freshmen. When you look at all the freshmen on your roster, who can you say has immediately made an impact, in a collegiate uniform? Because transitioning from either the high school level or coming over internationally, it's a big change. So who can you really say kind of just got it right away?
Yeah, I would say, we graduated our captain last year in Jack Huckstep, and he played a pretty pivotal role for us, just as far as work rate and kind of doing the dirty work around the field. And we've had a freshman come in, MJ Spangenberg, who just has a huge work rate. The guy's just everywhere. When we go back and watch tape, we kind of wonder how he got from point A to point B to have those involvements so quickly one after another. And you can't replace that on the field. It's if your guys are more involved than the other team's guys, you probably stand a pretty good chance of winning. And so players with that kind of work rate are just really welcome.
And as we're winding down here, Coach, tell me a little bit about the spring now. What are the expectations moving forward? And, for those that, look at the website and say, well, I don't see anything. There's no games on here. How do games actually get picked for you guys to play?
So when as we settle on our conference schedule, we're in the most competitive conference in the highest level of college rugby in America. We have the 2 games against the current national champions, Life University. We want to win both of those. It's a huge ask, but we're up for the challenge. It's just a matter of putting it all together. 2 games against Arkansas State, another top 10 team in our conference, and then we'll be hosting Clemson here, and maybe a few other surprise travelers coming to town too. So really big, a really big spring filled with some big names and really competitive teams.
Well, Coach, good luck to you and the rugby team as we move forward into the spring. That's Coach Josh Macy here on Lion Pride Sports. We thank him for joining us. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Brad Wachler. He's the Vice President of Intercollegiate Athletics here at Lindenwood University. And he's next right here on Lion Pride Sports.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
Welcome back into Lion Pride Sports. Again, I'm Andrew Rogers, now being joined by Brad Wachler, the Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics here at Lindenwood University. And we are excited to welcome him in, and I'll do that right now. Brad, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk first about the move to the GLVC, because you were the brains behind the whole operation. So why did you feel that this was the right direction to go for Lindenwood?
Yeah, I think when you look at conference realignment, never an easy decision. We had a really good run with MIAA. They were the first conference to welcome us in as an NCAA Division II team and had a lot of success in that conference. But when you look at the geographic footprint where we fall, again, we were making 8-9 hour bus trips to Kearney, Nebraska, and Fort Hays, Kansas, and Edmond, Oklahoma, and so just really tough trips for our student athletes and for our coaches when you look at missed class time and just the competitiveness of it. Just really hard to be on a bus for that long. And so when you look at the GLVC, a lot of programs that are within, well, we have several that are within the St. Louis metropolitan region, and then we have many that are within 4 hours of campus. So I think when you look at the geographic footprint, I think that was a really important decision for us. And then also when you look at the demographic of the university itself, I mean, we were a private school and a public school league, and now there's a very good makeup in the GLVC between privates and publics. So we just fit a lot better in the GLVC. And so I'm looking forward to the transition in the fall.
Yeah, and so it just makes sense based on all the details that you just laid out. And just real fast to get your take, would you say travel would have been like the main reason why, and then all these other things kind of fell below it, or would you say something outweighed the travel that really caused the transition?
I mean, we could manage the travel. I mean, we managed it for 6 years in the MIAA, and I think we were pretty successful doing so. That's one factor. I don't know if that's necessarily the overriding factor. I would say it's more the makeup of our institution is much more similar and aligned with the makeup of the GLVC schools compared to the MIAA schools. And then I think you also look at, again, while travel is a component of the geographic footprint, we have the ability to create more natural rivalries, especially when you have schools like McKendree and Maryville and UMSL that are within the St. Louis market, and then some schools that are again, not too far from us. So, again, there's just more I think symmetry between us and those programs than there are with the MIAA, where we were, again, an outlier as being the farthest school east. So, again, travel was one component and one thing we looked at pretty seriously, but it was just one factor. It wasn't the overriding factor.
And I like how you brought up the local rivalries aspect to this conversation, because I feel like as a student body, this could really be good for a lot of students to be able to, go 25 minutes to Maryville University or 25 minutes down the road to UMSL. And there's really, that fine line of now you can say like, okay, they're the river match. You can go back to saying that. Yeah. And I honestly 100% agree that when it comes to building a rival, we really didn't have that in the MIAA.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say our closest rival was would probably be Central Missouri, but everybody's Central Missouri's rival because nobody really likes them in the MIAA. So,
and they have two mascots.
Yeah, exactly. They have two mascots. So yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
And then talk to me a little bit about this part of the transition, because you did mention a lot of these teams already play GLVC schools. It kind of, again, just makes sense. So was that a huge decision-making factor, too, of saying, like, if we're looking at soccer, for example, especially for the GLVC, soccer is one of the most competitive conferences. And the GLVC is one of soccer's most competitive conferences, so I feel like that also plays a fact.
Yeah, the sports in that conference more closely align with the sports that we offer. Obviously, we have a lot of sports on the NCAA side and on the non-NCAA side, and so when you look at some of those schools, let's take McKendree for instance, because again, it's right down the road. They are probably the closest to our model in terms of the number of sports and the type of sports that they offer. Both NCAA and non-NCAA sports. And so I think that there is, again, when you look at symmetry, there is a lot more symmetry between the sports that are offered within the GLVC and what we offer here. And, soccer is a perfect example, I think. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's a core sport in the GLVC, for men's soccer specifically. And whereas where we are now in the MIAA, there's only 6 teams, and so that, again, our soccer program has an opportunity to be a little bit more competitive, I think, now in the GLVC. And sports like men's and women's lacrosse and swimming and diving, they now have a home in the GLVC where they didn't have a home in the MIAA because the MIAA didn't offer it. So our men's lacrosse program was independent. Which is really hard to be an independent program. And our women's lacrosse program was playing in that RMAC, which then they're flying over to Denver 2 or 3 times a year. So there's just a lot more, again, I keep using the word, but a lot more symmetry between us and the GLVC from a sport.
Yeah, so you mentioned, the independence. That's exactly where I wanted to go next. Was a lot of these teams or sports that we have here at Lindenwood were conferenceless. There wasn't really, they played whoever, and whoever wanted to play them, basically, is what it looked like to be. And now finally giving them a conference to play in is really nice. Yeah. But from the standpoint of, say, a football guy, because I think that's where the whole conversation kind of got a little bit blurry, because the MIAA was looked at as the SEC of Division II football, and now you're so-called downgrading, if that's how they want to kind of put the adjective in front of the term. So, in your eyes, though, and as the athletic director, you're the guy that says, okay, well, we have more sports here than football, so we're trying to do what's best for the program. But do you feel like this will even be a downgrade for football?
So, well, that's an interesting question, and I think the MIAA is a very good football conference, so let me start there. But what I will say is that University of Indianapolis, who's in the GLVC, beat Fort Hays State in the tournament.
And they're good.
Year. Yeah, and so to say that the GLVC can't be competitive with MIAA, I think is a pretty big misstatement. I think outside of Northwest Missouri over the last few years, the MIAA hasn't had a national champion. They're not going to have a national champion this year. So there's a lot of good football nationally outside of the MIAA, and what I'm most excited about is the opportunity to play teams that are outside of that of the conference. So we play our schools in the GLVC, but then we also have an opportunity to schedule some non-conference games against potentially even some FCS Division I programs, which I'm looking forward to, and it's a great for our student athletes and for our kids to be able to go and play that type of competition, and it's a great recruiting tool as well. I don't look at it as a downgrade by any means. I look at it as an opportunity to make a statement and be successful nationally.
And people disagree with me a lot when I bring up this point. And honestly, I think you're on the same page with me, just based on the answers that you're giving me. Is who wouldn't want to go for a national championship is how I kind of look at any sport. I don't care if you're at the low end of Division III or if you're the best team in Division I college football, like Alabama. You want to go for a championship, and that's the goal of a program. That's what you're trying to establish. And when it comes to the recruiting part, so many people bring up arguments of, oh, well, now they're not going to be able to recruit the guys that they would have been able to recruit in the MIAA because the conferences are so drastically different. Yeah. And I'm honestly thinking in my head, I'm like, well, if you can call yourself a national champion, if you can say like, okay, we're making a tournament run, we're getting to this point, you could be that key piece to get us there. Yeah. That's not going to be a driving factor to a kid coming out of high school saying like, oh, I'd rather go win a ring than, oh, I'd rather be middle of the pack, lower end of this conference. So I don't know. Did you think a little similarly to that?
Yeah, I think you and I have had this conversation before too, because I look at it as putting yourself in the position to win a national championship. And that's the ultimate goal for any sport. It doesn't matter which sport, whether it's football or anything else. What's the best possible position can you be in to win that national championship? And when you look at it from a recruiting standpoint, I think that's really important. I think that's what kids are interested in. I don't. People always say, "Well, you're gonna lose recruits because you're leaving the SEC of Division II football," and I brought this up to you before. Is I don't, unless you're maybe in the Kansas City area where it's the hotbed of MIAA football. The kids that we're recruiting don't know conferences. They don't know conferences. Unless you're talking about a Power 5 school, And I came from the Division I world, kind of a mid-major program, and at that point in time, too, it's not like I'm going to play in the Mid-American Conference. It's like I'm going to play. I was at Central Michigan, so I'm going to play at Central Michigan University. It's the same thing here. It's not I'm going to play at Lindenwood or I'm going to play in the MIAA. It's our coaches selling the message to the recruits that we're putting you in a position to compete for a national championship. Kids don't know the difference between Division II conferences, and so. Ultimately, I think that's what our coaches are really good at, and that's what they're doing right now, is selling that that's our goal, is to be in the national tournament every year and competing for a championship.
And I would argue a lot of kids don't even know the conferences in Division I. Like there's like you said, the Power 5 that you can really just say like, okay, I know all of these, but there's really, if you go down to like, the MAC, the American, like no one really knows those.
Yeah.
So you're right. Yeah, that's a big point to say. Now, you've been here for 3 years. Mm-hmm. Was this in the works right when you got here, or was this kind of something that was brought on to you as your first order in your role?
Yeah, this was something that the president had mentioned to me that was in the works as I even started, before I even actually physically got on ground on campus, this was conversations that we were having in terms of, because there was some conference shifting in some schools that were there's some schools that were having some financial trouble even that ended up closing their doors and they were going to create some openings in the GLVC potentially, and so this was a conversation that had been going on even before I got here. That the president brought up to me, I think even potentially during the interview process. So yeah, it's been going on for some time now.
And speaking of interviews, you made a lot of interviews also in these 3 years for coaches. You're trying to bring in the best person possible to lead the program to a winning side of things, and I think you've done that so far. But just for example, we'll give 3 coaches here. Coach Stugart of the football team, he's brought up a 2-9 record all the way up to 4-7, and it still seems like it could have been climbing. This year, I honestly think they could have gone even based on even the start they had. Coach Musso brings up the women's soccer team up 2 more wins opposed to last year, and then Coach Condon brings the volleyball team to their first ever MIAA tournament game, and he did it 2 years in a row. So, just talk about some of the coaches that you've brought in and the impact they've made.
Yeah, no, we've been fortunate over the first couple of years, and I probably hired more coaches than I was hoping I would have to. But I think again there's a need to make those transitions, and the coaches that we were fortunate enough to bring in, I think have done an incredible job. And again, when you get people on campus and look at our facilities and look at our level of competitiveness and our ability to be competitive, I think it's really impressive. And we were fortunate with a couple coaches that kind of just fell into our lap. Coach Condon being one of them. I'd like to take credit for that one, but he was at a school that actually was going to merge with Georgia Southern, and so he was going to be out of a job, and he had a ton of success being in 9 straight NCAA tournaments previous to that. So he kind of fell in our lap, but he's been outstanding and incredible. And Coach Stugart, yeah, I agree. I think he's frustrated because he's used to winning, and he's not. But he had a lot of work to do to come in here and turn around the culture and get us going in the right direction. And he's certainly done that. And you're right, we could have won a couple more games this year. But I'm really excited about next year and what that's going to bring. Coach Musso, again, same thing, is turned the culture around really, really quickly, and I'm really excited about the future there. We hired Coach Falco for women's basketball, off to an incredible start this year, and I really have that program going in the right direction. And don't forget Coach Macy, because he was one of my early hires too, because he's been here a couple of years now, and he's done a great job with our rugby program, again turning around that culture of that program and having that program go in the right direction, and currently ranked really high in the national rankings. So we have a great coaching staff. I mean, I've said this from the very beginning, and again, I came from the Division I world, and there is no doubt that we have Division I caliber coaches that just live in the Division II, kind of the Division II model. But our coaches, I would put them up against any Division I program in the country. So fortunate to have the coaches that we have.
Well, Brad, I could kick the can with you all day about this topic. We could talk about the GLVC or any of these coaches all the time. Unfortunately, we're out of time here. So first, I wanted to thank you for taking some time sitting down with joining us. Also, thanks to Coach Macy early on in the show. That'll do it here for Lion Pride Sports. For myself, Andrew Rogers, and for both of my guests, we thank you for joining us here, and stay tuned for next semester on Lion Pride Sports.